Hello, everyone. Just letting folks in.
Kabbalah. Sounds like an African meeting somewhere.
I will wait one more minute and then we'll start. By raise of hands, if I can see you, who was not here last week? Okay. So just briefly, we talked about some of the main themes of Shtisel. Today, we're going to focus on the paintings that Akiva did, particularly in season 1 and 2. We'll touch on season 3. And last week we talked about how to deal with grief and how the dead continue to live on in our lives. All right. I want to encourage all of you to speak up and ask questions and comments. But do me a favor also and keep yourself mute until you're ready to talk. And you can either use an icon to show me that you're raising your hand or just raise your hand. Obviously, if I can't see you, I don't know that you want to participate. But either come on camera or where is that little icon that you can use to indicate
at the bottom, David? It says reactions.
Yes, there it is. It was just being blocked. Perfect. All right, thanks so much. All right. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. So here are a few quotes from a book by Chaim Potok, well-known author, was a good friend of my dad's. And that may be why the rabbi in the series is Rabbi Saunders. Although my dad was Rabbi Sanders. All right, but the book Asher Lev is in a way a very similar themed story of how an artist, in this case also coming from a very traditional Jewish family, kind of has to learn how to express himself and become his own person. And that artist's name was Asher Lev. Jan, you want to read this first quote?
Asher Lev, an artist, is a person first. He is an individual. If there is no person, there is no artist. Millions of people can draw. Art is whether there is a scream in you wanting to get out in a special way. Every artist is a man who has freed himself from his family, his nation, his race. Every man who has shown the world the way to beauty, to true culture, has been a rebel, a universal without patriotism, without home, who has found his people everywhere.
Okay. So do you then see the beginning traces here of the same things that apply to Akiva in his world, in his trying to emerge from this very cloistered life of Mea Sha'arim and this family that is Haredi, right? So
David, I don't know if you got my chat. That book was based on my great uncle, Sir Jacob Epstein.
wonderful.
And he was excommunicated from the Orthodox synagogue where he went in New York because of it.
So what character was he?
Asher Lev.
He was Asher Lev himself. Okay. All right. Claudia, that could be a good thing to write up. All right. So, what did you notice about the progression of Akiva's works? Again, this is obviously something that the creators of Shtisel wanted us to take note of, right? This is a story of an artist. There are many stories here, of course, but the key story is the story of the artist Akiva, or Kiva, and especially during the first 2 seasons, our focus is on him. So what did you notice about his paintings?
They,
Yeah, Lori.
they went from kind of animals, very basic, and then morphed into more emotional type things that were much more evolved.
Mm-hmm. So even as a relatively, new painter, right? He's going to start at some place. He's not drawing vases, but he is drawing animals, right? Real life. Yes, Andrea.
So wasn't there, didn't he get a job like copying paintings, religious art, which he hated because there was no soul in it for him, but he could make money doing that.
Right. So first he is just sketching things. He is wanting to, represent the world through his eyes, right? That's what an artist is doing. And then Andrea is correct, which is his talent, he sells his talent, but there's something more nefarious about that, if you recall. Yeah, June. June, unmute yourself.
I think he starts off quite playful and youthful, and you catch the idea that he's still young and, you know, enjoying these monkeys that are jumping around. And you get the transition, as somebody says, it takes a different tone as life takes its turns on him. And then, of course, the wedding dress is tremendously powerful, but it's a real transition of an artist from being a young man to the end.
Right. By the way, I had not thought about this before, but how many of you have been to the biblical zoo in Jerusalem? Well,
Biblical.
those monkeys are lemurs, and they are well known for jumping out of their, their habitat. So they're boundary crossers too.
Mhm.
As we'll see, that becomes an important piece of the storyline with Kiva. But what does it mean to paint nature? Whether it's the monkeys or ducks that he draws. He's very much drawing these nature images at first, connecting with nature, his own nature, and then he moves to selling his talent. But what happens there? The man that is commissioning him to paint wants to pass his work over as what? As his own, right?
Right.
So we get that sense then that the artist now is conflicted because in a way he is selling his soul. Now, do you remember early on in season 1 where he paints a portrait of his grandparents who he wants to bring that as a gift to his grandmother for her birthday. And what happens? Go ahead, Andy.
The dealer sells it to a couple from Wisconsin or someplace like that.
Right. There's a visiting couple in Jerusalem from somewhere in America, and they're not that interested in all this other stuff that he's got on, all this religious iconography. But he then does agree to sell that. But what occurs at the end? Do you remember about that painting? Kiva is able to buy it back or trade it back with some other paintings that he makes. It's an interesting theme. You notice that same theme occurs in season 3, where at first he sells the paintings, the portraits of his wife, and then he wants to buy it back. Right? So there's an interesting parallel here between his very, I believe that is really his first portrait or his first major painting that he's doing, that he's not copying from someone else, right? He's copying it from a photograph, but he's not copying it from some other artist, all right? What do we see from there? What paintings occur?
The painting he did of the little boy that he imagined wasn't copying something else.
We're going to get there, but that's the penultimate painting in season 2. So actually, I'm sorry, it's painting number 8. There's another painting after that, and then there's the final painting in season 2. So we're going to actually, Claudia, thank you for mentioning it, because we're going to actually look at a clip about that painting of the boy with the goldfish. All right. What other paintings do we see before we get to the goldfish and the boy? And from June's point of view, the maturing of an artist and the deepening of the artist, right? at first it's very, as you say, more playful, just, sketching and then doing some paintings that are copying others people's work. So let's read this piece. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here in a second. So the owner of the gallery who is hiring him is named Fuchs. All right. Ivor, could you read this piece? It's in the yellow.
Yep. Fuchs gives Kive a photo of himself, requesting a self-portrait. Kive returns to the gallery to say the photo does not reflect any emotional depth or personal awareness and wants to take a few candid photos of Fuchs. Kive instructs him, don't think about how the painting will come out. Think of weighty matters. Think of the mistakes you have made throughout life. Things you regret, things about true loves you have had, all the lies that surround your life. Old age, that is right around the corner, your greatest fears. What scares you, lieb Fuchs? Or what scares you, lieb Fuchs? Later he finishes Fuchs's portrait and then paints on Fuchs's face red lips and a nose, clown-like.
Okay. So this was, I think, the moment that we get a little, sense of Akiva's potential, of who he could be as an artist. Imagine him challenging this art gallery man who is his boss, right? Who's selling his paintings and saying, dig deep inside yourself. Let's get rid of the mask called Leib Fuchs and let's see who you really are. Because that's who I'd like to paint, right? I don't want to paint just this facade. Of course, what is Akiva doing? He is the mask. He is the facade. He is the front for. He is the painter for the front called Leib Fuchs. Do you remember what happens after this?
Would you remind why he painted the nose and the red mouth? I don't remember.
Because when he really looks at the portrait that he's created, what does he recognize? He recognizes that Leib Fuchs hadn't dug anywhere deep. He was all the facade. So he just puts, red lips and a clown's nose on him. He ruins the painting. But he's doing it for us to recognize that he doesn't want to play that game anymore. And the game really is one of superficiality. Yes. Go ahead.
So the clown is the fact that he shows the clown, that's in and of itself a conversation. Because what is a clown? It's the tears of the clown. There's such sadness underneath there. And maybe there's also an implication that Fuchs himself is hiding sadness that he may or may not know about. So he slaps on that nose and that mouth. And I mean, we wonder if that's what he's doing. I think nothing he paints or nothing he does is unintentional.
Correct. June, great insight. I had not seen that. And I think that that's a really beautiful point. Now, we don't know enough about Fuchs's life, but where I would point out is, as we're going to now head, shortly we're going to head to the goldfish painting, that art in this way is a way for the artist to deal, in particular in this series of Shtisel, it's a way for them to deal with their grief, right? How many of you have watched The Crown series? In season 1, episode 9, I believe it is, there's a very interesting dialogue that happens between Winston Churchill and the man who was commissioned to do his portrait. And there is a really interesting dialogue about Winston Churchill expressing his own grief through his paintings. So no question that this is a powerful theme that gets connected to in the seasons of Shtisel. There's one more thing with Fuchs, though. Do you recall what happens with him and Kiva's paintings? So Kiva,
Is this the same gallery owner that wants his name on all of the paintings?
yes. So what is the painting that that he winds up wanting to? Fuchs wants to put this painting under his name in a contest or a gallery. So he winds up selling to Fuchs, if you remember, the portrait that he does of Elisheva. After he breaks up with her and they are no longer going to be a match, he winds up selling that portrait to Fuchs for 1,500 shekel. All right. So again, that painting represents a piece of his soul, a soulmate that he wanted to connect with, and yet he is selling that art once he realizes that it will no longer, it may be no longer have as much meaning, but it's a painful reminder to him of what could have been, but what wasn't. All right, so now I want to show you it's a little over 5-minute clip of Akiva meeting this little boy on the street. Now, this is a very powerful piece, and the fact that they dedicate over 5 minutes to this story, I think tells us that we should really pay attention to this story and what's going on between Akiva and the boy. And then it gets into a little bit of what's real and what's not real. You know, what is Akiva seeing and experiencing, and what is he imagining as an artist? And back to June's point, what is this revealing in terms of his grief? So I'd like us to take a look at this story and analyze it. Now, again, one of the things that we looked at last week, if you weren't here, was from the Kabbalah perspective, how we resolve our grief, how we come from a place of the notion that the soul is eternal to manifesting in this world the notion that the person lives on. So in the spiritual realm, the soul can continue, but in this physical world, we want to find ways that we keep the person alive, right? And we have many ways that we do that, right? We keep the person alive through our memories of that person, through, as we said last week, through using a recipe of a grandmother or a mother or a father, or naming a child after someone who has deceased. We continue to manifest that person who lived their lives in this world, not just through our memories, but also through our actions. We may, give charity in their name or set up a foundation, things like that. So I'm going to share the screen again, and I have it set up here. Let's see if I'm going to need to close just a couple of things quickly. One second. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. This is season 2, episode 7. Here comes Kiva. Artist.
סליחה על ההפרעה. יש פה איזה ילד שיושב בחוץ. ראית אותו?
כן, הוא היה פה כשבאתי.
באמת?
כן. מה, הוא עדיין יושב שם?
כן. אני אצא אליו. אמא שלך לא באה? מה אתה אומר? מוזר. מה נעשה?
אני לבד.
לא, אתה לא לבד, חס ושלום. עוד מעט אם אתה.
אני רעב.
די הגיוני. האמת שגם אני מאוד רעב. איך קוראים לך?
איציקל.
איציק למה? אתה יודע איפה אתם גרים?
בירושלים.
איפה בירושלים? אתה יודע אולי מה הטלפון בבית?
אני רעב.
טוב, מה אתה אוהב לאכול?
מרשמלו.
מרשמלו זה ממתק, אתה צריך לאכול משהו בריא. אתה אוהב פיצה? היה לך טעים?
טעים מאוד, תודה רבה.
בתיאבון?
אני צמא.
אני אביא לך מים. בבקשה.
שכחתי את הברכה.
שעה כהל. אני אברך ואתה תחזור אחריי, טוב? ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך אתה אדוני,
אלוהינו מלך האוילום,
אלוהינו מלך האוילום,
שהכל נהיה בדבורי.
שהכל נהיה בדבורי.
אמן. כל הכבוד, בירכת יפה מאוד. אתה שומע חמוד? אני חושב שכדאי שתחזור למטה לשבת על הספסל. אני מפחד שאמא ואבא יגיעו והם לא יראו אותך שם והם ידאגו.
אני לא רוצה להיות לבד.
חס ושולם, אתה לא לבד. עוד מעט אמא תבוא.
גם הדג רעב. אני מפחד.
מה? למה? אני אשמור עליך עד שאמא תחזור. בסדר? ואחר כך, יותר מאוחר, כשאני אסיים לעבוד, אז גם נדבר עם גמח ילדים אבודים.
מה זה?
זה גמח כזה של כמה דודות מבוגרות והן מאוד נחמדות מגאולה, שהן עוזרות להחזיר ילדים שהלכו לאיבוד חזרה לאמהות שלהן.
וככה תשאיר אותי שם?
מה פתאום? אני אהיה איתך כל הזמן. אל תדאג. תראה איך הוא אוכל יפה.
הוא גם לא צריך לברך.
נכון מאוד. איך בכלל קוראים לו לדג שלך?
דג.
מה, אין לו שם?
אני לא יודע מה השם שלו, כי הוא לא מדבר.
אתה צודק. רגע. שאלת אותו פעם?
אי אפשר לדבר עם דג.
בטח שאפשר. בוא ננסה. סליחה, אדון דגוביץ', מה השם שלך? בונם! בונם, זה שם קדוש, אתה בטח גלגול של איזה צדיק. תראה איזה ענווה, איזה מידות טובות, כל הזמן שותק. אני לא שותק! אני יודע גם לדבר! סליחה, אתה צודק. תגיד, רב בונם, אתה יודע גם לשיר? איזה שאלה, אני שרתי פעם עם שווקי! באמת? אז אולי תשאיר לנו משהו. רחם, רחם לא השם אלוקינו, רחם.
All right, and I'm going to skip just ahead to the end of this, where we see the juxtaposition of the story. Okay, it's right here. So now he's working on the painting. Hopefully it'll load. Whoop. Well, we may not see it, but I'm hoping we will. Start again. All right, I'm not sure why it's not loading. But in the next scene, do you recall what happens? So he paints the painting of the little boy with holding the goldfish. And Hadassah, who is the other artist, comes in, and there's an implication that perhaps the boy was there, but the entire sequence that we just watched never happened. What clues do we have that it was just a fantasy as opposed to reality? As I was watching it, I began to wonder, this story does not seem to be making much sense. So what clues were we getting that it was maybe a fantasy, not reality? Jan?
Well, the little boy didn't know his last name or where he lived, or he didn't know the blessing. That's probably not likely either.
Right. So all of the story doesn't seem to be making much sense.
Also, Kiva wouldn't have taken him away from the bench. He would have waited for his mother at the place.
Or to Ira's point, at some juncture, he would have done what? He would have either taken him back down to the bench, or we would have seen them waiting for a while, right? Until, you give up. And at that point, you take the kid upstairs, you call you call the police, you call Child Protective Services. You don't start, having a pizza party and then, hanging out with the kid, or however beautiful and cute it is. All right.
But
So-
the other artists saw the kid. The woman artist did see the kid.
Right. So Claudia, the way that I understood that was that there was a boy there at some point, but that doesn't mean that the rest of it occurred. In other words, there has to be, how would you say it? There has to be some piece of reality that enters into the dream world or into the fantasy world. So I think what we're left understanding here is that Kiva is constructing this story in his own mind out of having seen a little boy on the bench, right? The little boy was on the bench, okay? So what does this fantasy, what is this story telling us? Yes, June. And June, make sure you unmute.
Sorry. I think it really tells us many things. First of all, he sees this kid who's lonely and sitting by himself on a street corner. He immediately identifies with his loneliness. And then he, goes into how he could go down, and he imagines how he could sit with him and talk to him about the fish. And then, of course, when he brings the fish into his place, he puts it in a glass bowl. And, he feeds the fish. And I think the symbol of that, first of all, aren't we all living in some ways in a glass bowl? And then second of all, aren't we all hungry? And the other thing about a fish is it's just swimming around. There's a pointlessness to the fish. I mean, it's so interesting on so many levels. You can't catch a fish either. It's elusive. And then we see his compassion and how he's trying to think how he could love this child if he had a child, and he could feed the child and nourish the child. And the hug at the end just seemed so satisfying to the other and Shtisel. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of themes going on in this particular picture.
All right, June, you gave us almost too many themes
Sorry.
to consider, but they're all really nice ways to kind of go down. But let's hear maybe some other themes, and then we'll try to tie that together. Yeah, Jen.
To me, he's being the father that he always wanted and obviously never had with this little boy.
Yeah.
Well, also, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
No, go ahead. I think you're speaking.
No.
Also, the main thing to me is he's waiting for his mother to come, and she doesn't come. She's all alone. He's saying he's alone.
So what is Kiva waiting for?
He's waiting for someone to come and love him, and so he won't be alone.
Right.
Well, Kiva's grieving his mom.
Right. Kiva himself is
Exactly.
grieving the loss of his mother.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly. Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was.
And by the way, at the beginning, thank you. And at the beginning of the of our talk last week, we mentioned that there's an interesting parallel here between the story of, Abraham, the elder father, seeking a match for his son Isaac, and they find finally in the end the cousin to match up with, Rebecca, and in our story of Shtisel, Libby, who is his cousin. But before that, there are other, right? There are other shidduchim. There's other matches that are offered. Notice that this little boy's name is Itzik, which is a Yiddish name for Isaac, Yitzchak, right? That's the little boy's name. So here we have Kivi. All right, now that's I like where June and Jan were going with that. That's one piece of it. And even though he has that nurturing, right? Kiva has that nurturing side in him. It was not something that he received from his dad, but he received from his mom. And he's missing that. And the boy in the story says, I'm waiting, he's waiting for his mother, or he assumes he's waiting for his mother. Why didn't he assume he's waiting for his father? Well, because the mother is the one who's going to take care of him. And that's what he's bereft of. All right, let's dig a little in with what June was suggesting also about the fish. They had a choice to pick anything they wanted. Why pick a fish in a plastic bag? The boy could have had a little dog with him.
Is it Purim?
Oh, possibly. So Lori, go with that thought, because I had a thought similar to that. Why bring up Purim? You went mute.
I have someone here vacuuming, so I can't.
Oh, okay, I see. Well, in that case, what Lori is suggesting already is that they give out goldfish, right, as part of a Purim carnival, or at school, kids will get a goldfish, right, as a prize for things. So that's the simple explanation. What might be a further explanation of what does a goldfish in a plastic bag represent?
It's very temporary. He's not going to live there forever. He's got to either find a new place to live or die in there.
So unless the goldfish is what?
Gets air, gets oxygen.
Unless the goldfish is taken care of by somebody, unless the little boy is taken care of by somebody, he may not make it, right? We all need love. We all need that nurturance. And this is one of the things that Kiva, in fact, is looking for in a match. He wants to find someone who will love him like his mother. And I pointed out last week that in episode 1 of season 3, we watch Libby touch Kivi on the cheek in the exact same manner that his mother touched him on the cheek in a dream of his. It's that companionship, that love, that nurturance that he is really seeking. But first he has to mourn the loss of mom, right? He has to let go of her. And how does he accomplish that? Through his painting. The painting then becomes a way for him to work through his grief. Now, I'm hoping that we'll be able to get back onto Netflix. We'll see. And I'll stop the share for a second just so that I can see if I can get on here. Okay. And I apologize for the delay, but I'm hoping that it will load. It is. So we're heading to the last episode. And this is the interview that Kiva does on television. And this is remember the painting that he does of a woman.
שלום לך, עקיבא שטיסל.
Okay, 1 second. Okay.
לא שכיח למצוא אומן שהוא גם צעיר מאוד, גם מוכשר מאוד וגם חרדי. שלום לך, עקיבא שטיסל.
שלום, שלום.
בסוף השבוע הקרוב תיפתח באגף החדש של מוזיאון ישראל תערוכת יחיד ראשונה, יש לומר, של ציוריך.
כן.
עוד רגע אנחנו נשמע איך קורה שצייר צומח מתוך החברה החרדית ששולט בציווי לא תעשה לך פסל וכל תמונה. אבל קודם הייתי רוצה לשאול אותך על ציור מסוים, זה שנמצא ברקע שלנו. אם צעירה מניקה את בנה, והדבר הראשון שעולה על הדעת הוא האסוציאציה. היא לתמונות המצריות של האם הקדושה, מריה, מניקה את בנה ישו, וזה כשזה יוצא מתחת לידיו של צעיר חרדי, יש פה אולי אמירה מעניינת.
מה? לא, 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 סליחה שאני קוטע אותך. זה לא קשור. אין פה שום דבר נוצרי, ממש לא. גם לא חרדי. זה פשוט זה זיכרון שלי.
זיכרון אישי?
כן. בכל ציור יש ניסיון להפוך את ההווה, את מה שקורה עכשיו מול העיניים, לזיכרון. והציור הזה, זה בעצם, זה זיכרון של זיכרון. התינוק בציור זה אני, אבל זה גם הבן שלי.
אני לא בטוח שאני מבין. התינוק בציור הזה הוא אתה? והאישה היא אמך, היא בעצם האמא שלך.
אפשר לומר, גם, אבל גם לא.
תגיד, איך בכלל קורה שבחור חרדי שגדל במאה שערים הופך ליום אחד לצייר?
Okay. That was the piece that I wanted you to see. All right. So this is the final painting that he does in season 2. We if you were watching it from the beginning, this is where we kind of anticipate and lead up to. So what do we begin to see here? That Akiva, the artist, is now being able to express. Despite the fact that this interviewer wants to take it in a different direction. But Akiva brings him back to the point and what it is that is important to him as the artist. Sue.
I'm a new person here. Well, I think that he has realized what it is that he really wants and what he's really missing. And so he's speaking from his heart and saying, yes, it's me. And what I want is to be held. I want to be nurtured. And this is what I'm really missing. And so that is personal to him and also has some universal significance as well.
Right. The artist, if the artist is going to touch us, they have to dig into something that is deep inside of themselves. Whether that is an artist who writes, an artist who paints, an artist who plays music, you know, any form of representational art has to come from a place of soulfulness if they're going to evoke that in us. And that's what Akiva was trying to do. He was entering and digging deeper into himself. Remember the speech he gives to Fuchs? You know, to tell me, you know, don't just smile at me with your fake smile. You know, tell me about your, you know, think about your deepest regrets. Think about, you know, how you've lied to people. I mean, those are powerful words to come from a young man who is just beginning on his journey of self-reflection.
You know, something about art contains time and space in a different way than other things do, than just talking about it. And that painting was fluid in time and space. And it was both memory and living memory of his.
Yeah, they give him a line there, Claudia, that's pretty deep about a memory of a memory
Right.
and making the present into a memory. Usually we make memories into the present moment. We do it the other way. But they're trying to imply here that somehow we can even make the present alive with the past and bring that into our awareness. Any other comments or questions about what's being presented here?
Well, maybe he's talking about the spiral of life, you know, that this baby was him with his mother, the implication of that, but then it's not him and his mother, it's his baby and his baby's mother. And and just to go back to what the previous person said, that the fluidity of time and space, that he's merging it all together.
Yeah. So what does it also represent in terms of where we started today with the quotes from Chaim Potak's Asher Lev about an artist needing first and foremost to know himself, right? To know his own soul, right? That's really, in a way, what the entire Shtisel is about, which is that we are all confronted by the plastic bag of water that we have been dumped in or placed in, that confinement that is our entire world, right? Even if it's transparent so that we can see outside of it, we sometimes, that in fact is the challenge, because we don't know we're in the plastic bag. You know, a question we ask in one of our classes on time is, in what way is a fish is to water as humans are to what?
Time.
A fish is to water as humans are to what? So what is it? Yeah, well, that's one of the answers we give. And what is that capacity that we have that we can begin to see outside of ourselves? And Kiva is not only struggling with his grief about his mother, but he is also in the same time trying to emerge from his small environment, right? You remember that you see in this clip that Libby is watching him on television.
Yeah.
Right? She is watching him talk about this painting that he did from his heart. He also, I didn't play this, but he also says that he almost gave up his painting, but he met a woman that inspired him, who is Libby. And we know her name means heart, my heart. So Libby is his heart who inspires him to do what? To go against her own father's wishes that he give up art altogether. The precondition for him to be married to Libby is to stop being an artist. But she, in fact, she is his heart because she doesn't want him to give up his art. She doesn't want him to become so obsessed with art that he won't be a good partner for her. But he is willing, but she is interested in him continuing his art. And that's where we end season 2, where she meets him at the museum, I think it is, or the gallery.
Right.
Maybe it's the museum, and she sits down side by side with him on the bench to look at the portrait. That is his match. That is his shidduch. That is his soulmate, right? that not only helps him to overcome his grief, but also allows him to challenge the small little container that he's in, right? The fish bowl that he's in, and he can get out of that. Okay, so that's really what we're seeing in that final episode of season 2. Yes, June.
I'm asking you a religious question, not really apropos this particular theme. What do you think of the fact that the rabbi tells him you can't paint this and you can't paint, images? I understand too, the images of the Romans and all that, but that's another constraint for Akiva, that he can't do this and he can't do that. And how does he get around it? How does he negotiate it? How do we tell a human being not to do something that comes to them naturally, and why? I mean, I understand the other, graven images and that, but what do you think of that comment?
Well, it's an important one, and we could give an entire class on that. But what we see clearly in the show, Shulam, the father, who is, let's call him the representative of the tradition, he does not have any objection per se for him becoming an artist or doing painting. So it's clear that the painting itself is not something that is problematic from the show's point of view. It's really what's problematic is what?
The subject of the painting.
That number one, Claudia, correct, the subject of the painting, and also that is taking him away from the more traditional life. He's interacting with people out there who are not from his little fishbowl, right? But if you look into the sources, you'll see that there has always been a little antagonism towards the creation of art, specifically statues. So those are seen as graven images.
Mm-hmm.
But painting, again, is a little less representational of that. And June, your question is digging even deeper, which is, how do we stop people from really expressing who they are?
Right.
And in the end, Eva as an artist is really just an example of that. His older brother Tzvi Aryeh had a beautiful voice, but he bemoans the fact he has deep regret over never being able to really pursue that. And why was that? Because again, the implication is that Shulam did not encourage it. It goes back to the waterfront. I could have been something. But you have to also be careful.
Like the fishbowl, it's limited, and don't go out of that fishbowl because you can't survive.
But notice what Kiva does in the fantasy. He removes the fish from the plastic bag.
Right.
And at least puts the fish into a larger context, of which...
If that's Shtisel as a young artist, moving from the plastic bag into the fishbowl, which has got more opportunity.
Correct. But when you're in a fishbowl, you're constantly being observed.
I know.
Right? That's the whole idea of a fishbowl. Right. All right. We'll stop here for today. I welcome you back next week. We'll have our third and final installment of Shtisel. And I do want to also just highlight for you that we'll be teaching a class on Shtisel season 3 over the summer. It's going to be on Tuesdays at 12. And certainly welcome all of you to that class if you want to join us.
I thought this was that. Am I in the...
Oh, no, this is
Sorry.
not a problem. This is a free introduction
Okay.
to our class on Shtisel. And Melanie, who was just on, but just came off, she will be, oh, there she is. She'll be teaching our soul and space classes, which are introductory classes over the summer as well. So we certainly invite you to that. Check us out on KabbalahExperience.com. Look forward to seeing as many of you as possible who can join us next week. And I've got too many topics to choose from, but I'll pick one that I think will be of interest to finish up our series.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
My pleasure. Thank you all, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you around. Neil, good to see you. Joyce, bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.